Hi, this is material for Chapter 12, which is on stress, health, and coping. As always, we've got the learning outcomes, and the definition for stress is kind of interesting because we're talking about stress as well as stressors. So if you think about what's the difference between stress and stressors, with stress, we're talking about a negative emotional state. So we have this in response to an event that we perceive as taxing. Perceived is important because really a lot has to do with our perception of the event, which we'll get to. But that's stress, and then stressors are the events themselves, so what occurs to make you feel stress. As mentioned, what's important to know about stress is whether or not we think something actually is stressful. So whether we experience stress is going to depend a lot on our cognitive appraisal, on our thoughts towards that event. So this graph is going to walk us through the cognitive appraisal. So we might have an event, which is our stressor, that the car won't start, so you're afraid you're going to miss class. Then you go through a period of cognitive appraisal. So we do this really quickly, and we'll think, do I have the resources to cope with this event? That's our cognitive appraisal. If we say, yes, I can get to a bus, we don't feel stress. If we say, no, I have no resources, we feel stress. So we have that cognitive appraisal first. Even if we decide we can take a bus, that's our appraisal, but even if we decide we can take a bus, we might feel no stress. But we might need to do a reappraisal at the end of that. So did this work? Did my coping strategy work? If it did work and you're on your way, you don't feel any stress. But if it didn't work, then the stress comes back. So the idea is that you continuously have this cognitive appraisal that you're thinking about an event that occurs. Health psychology is a field where people really look at stress and at other components of how biological factors, psychological factors, and social factors, how they all influence health. And this is the case for health, illness, medical treatment, and health-related behaviors. So you might find health psychologists working in hospital settings, helping cancer patients adhere to their treatment, or working with children with diabetes, teaching them the best ways to kind of think about their condition and how to interact with their daily environment. So it's a really interesting field of psychology if you're interested in health stuff. What we're going to talk about for this unit, though, are stressors first, then we're going to talk about responses, and finally effects of stress. So it's split up in this 3 categories. The first we'll talk about are stressors themselves. So stressors, we're going to talk about several categories of things that are stressors, which are the events that can cause stress. The first are life events. So early researchers in this field thought that anything that might occur, even if it was good, it could cause stress. So even if you got married or pregnant or won some money, that all of this could cause stress. But we really think now there's some problems with this approach, mostly that people do react differently. So for some people, divorce may be a huge stressor, as it shows in this rating scale, but for other people, they might feel a great relief after a divorce, so it might not be as stressful to them. Also, change in and of itself is not necessarily stressful, so sometimes positive things happen and we don't feel that stress. Traumatic events are a different category of events or of stressors, and these are things that are really severe, far beyond what we might expect. Most people will experience one of these traumatic events, at least one, during their life, but it could be things like experiencing warfare or an assault of some kind, or some kind of terrorist attack, being there and seeing that. So anything that's traumatic that's really different than what we might expect. Daily hassles are things that we experience. We experience these constantly. I know I've had several daily hassles today. I'm sure you have too. These are minor events that upset and annoy us. I've got a list here of some that are common to college students. We know that more of these daily hassles, so people who experience a lot of these daily hassles, that they often have a worse physical health. And we also know that people who are lower in their socioeconomic status, so those who face discrimination or who are lower on kind of society's totem pole in terms of education or income or opportunity, that these people experience a lot more daily hassles on the regular days as well. And these hassles can also exacerbate the effects of major stressors. So if you have a major stressor like a hurricane, you're going to have a ton of daily hassles that follow from that major stressor. So where do I wash my clothes? How do I charge my phone? How do I get to a bank? Just tons of daily hassles. Work stress and burnout is stress that you'll experience in the workplace, but really it's kind of intense stress. So it's an unhealthy condition, but you've got chronic, prolonged work stress. And you can start to see people veer towards burnout when they have things like exhaustion. So even if they get a break from their job, they still feel exhausted. They feel cynical about their abilities to make a change or to have anything different happen. And they also feel like they're a failure, they're inadequate in their job. So if you could see someone experiencing these feelings in their job, then we would be worried that they'd head for a burnout period. Social and cultural sources of stress, these are things like crowding, crime, poverty, discrimination. Perception, though, of where one stands is important. So these things are obviously stressful in and of themselves, being discriminated against, facing crowding. They're very stressful. But also your perception is important. So this little graph is showing people rating themselves on a ladder. So where do you think you stand in terms of society? Are you the worst or the best off? And they found that those who report feeling like they're the worst off, even if they weren't the worst off objectively, if they felt like they were worse off than other people, they were more susceptible to the common cold. So your perception can be important. Acculturative stress is our final source of stress. And so this is the pressure of adapting to a new culture. This is lessened when your new culture accepts diversity. That brings us into responses to stress. So with responses to stress, we're going to talk about a lot of factors that influence how people respond to stress. Many of these are individual level factors, so things like personal control. If people feel like they have a sense of control over the event, then they often experience no more distress than someone who's not experiencing a stressful event. And they found this with individuals in nursing homes. Your book discusses that study where people with in nursing homes who had a great deal of control over their environments fared much better than those with no control. So having personal control is a good thing. Explanatory style, how you explain things in your life, is also an important factor in contributing to responses to stress. So people who are optimistic when something good happens, when they get an A on an exam, for example, they believe that that is going to be permanent, so they're always going to get A's. It's pervasive, they're capable of getting A's across many situations. And it's personal, it's something about them. A pessimist, though, when they receive an A on a test, they're going to think it's temporary, so they're probably not going to get another A again. It's specific to only that class, and it's an external cause, so that teacher just likes me. In the bad situation, the optimists and their pessimistic styles switch. So an optimist in a bad situation, maybe they fail a test. They're going to say this is temporary. I failed this test, but I'm not going to fail another. It's specific. I failed at this one test. That doesn't mean that it's going to happen in other classes. And there's an external cause. I failed because I was tired that week. I had a really busy week. It's something external. Whereas the pessimist would say the opposite. I failed due to something that's permanent. I'm going to fail in every class, and I'm going to fail because of who I am. So it's just the way you explain events and how they occur that can influence your responses. We also know with emotions, that chronic negative emotions, people who experience a lot of hostility and stress and anger, that this has a really strong link with poor health. People who experience a lot of joy and awe and gratitude, that this has an association with good health or positive health outcomes. The type A personality style is another thing we've identified as important for stress. People who are type A, they feel a sense of time urgency in everything they do. They feel really ambitious, want to compete. But the most important factor for type A is that they feel a lot of hostility. They express this hostility, they're hostile towards others. And this is what's really associated with the negative outcomes, with cardiovascular outcomes. So this personality style can be central to how people respond to stress. In addition to these individual level factors, we also have social level factors. A huge one is social support. So with social support, these are resources you get from other people in times of need. This can be monetary, like giving you money or food, or it can be things like giving you hugs and a shoulder to cry on. So people who have a more diverse social network, more people in their social network, they feel much better, they're healthier, it's health protective. A lot of research has been done with loneliness, and so just extremely, extremely potent health risk to feel lonely. And loneliness is a real subjective feeling. So you can have all the friends in the world, but you don't feel like anybody's truly there for you, and then you feel lonely. Or you can be surrounded by a group of people, but you don't feel like they're there for you, and you can feel lonely. So it's a very subjective feeling, but it's also a very dangerous feeling for your health. How people deal with stress. We know people try to cope with stress, and this coping, ideally, it would look different depending on the type of stressor. So if you've got a controllable situation, so if you get an F on a test, that should be controllable. You should be able to study more and study different things and do better next time. So the best type of response for that would be a problem-focused response. So you tackle the problem head on. If the situation is uncontrollable, though, you don't have any personal control, it makes sense then to focus on your emotions. So if you have some kind of medical test that's been conducted and you have to wait 3 weeks before you get a response, you can't really speed that time up. So it makes sense to focus more on your emotions, on trying to calm down, talk with other people, meditate or journal or whatever it is that make you feel better emotionally. The placebo effect is something that really shows us this important mind-brain linkage. And the placebo effect, what a placebo is it's an inactive substance. We often might refer to it as a sugar pill. But when people receive this inactive substance, in many people it's going to activate the same brain areas as painkillers. And so we really see how intertwined the kind of thought processes and the brain really are in the body. So the mind and the body very much connected. Minimizing effects of stress, so this is just some everyday advice, but avoid stimulants and definitely get some exercise, get enough sleep, practice relaxation. Many of us will stop doing these things when we're stressed, but it's really important to try to keep up with these tasks. And that will bring us into the health effects of stress. So for this, I really want you to watch this video, Stress Portrait of a Killer. Most of the videos in the class have been more for illustration purposes, but this one I think really delivers important content, and so I really want you to watch this one. There will be some questions on this video on the assignments. What Stress Portrait of a Killer is going to give you, too, is a great overview of the rest of these concepts that we're going to talk about for the remainder of the unit. So we'll talk about the physical effects of stress. Many of these effects of stress on your body are direct. So they directly alter your body functions, the way you deposit fat in your arteries and things like that. It's a direct effect. But other effects are indirect. So stress makes you more likely to maybe stress eat. It's going to prompt those behaviors that are going to jeopardize your well-being eventually. So you might eat too much, not exercise, not get enough sleep, and all of that's going to indirectly affect your health. The fight or flight response is something that the video will discuss as well. It'll show some examples of fight or flight. Fight or flight can be very valuable. It's this chain of physical reactions that help us identify and respond to an immediate threat. So it can be something extremely helpful. And we see this pathway with acute stress. This is a good thing. So if someone was chasing you and you're like, I gotta run, having that stress response is very important. Or if you have an exam to study for and you get stressed over that exam, but then you ace it and your stress level goes down, that's a good thing. Where we end up running into a lot of trouble is more of this prolonged stress. And that's what many of us get into, this habit where we can't break it, where we're constantly stressed. And that's a little bit more problematic there. You don't have to know each of these pathways or anything, just to understand acute stress can sometimes be good. Prolonged stress is where we run into some issues. The general adaptation syndrome tells us a little bit about this stress response. So what this is are the physical changes that occur as a result of stress. So if you have someone who's entering his medical residency, we see this picture here, as the first stage, when he first enters it, he's going to experience alarm. So his resources are going to mobilize. He's going to continue in that residency over months and months. His body is going to continuously try to adapt to that stressor. But then maybe he finally finishes his last exam in December, goes home, gets on the couch, and then just crashes, is sick for 3 weeks. His body has achieved exhaustion. So his reserves are depleted, and his adaptation is going to break down. Telomeres is something the video also discusses, but you can see telomeres here at the end of our chromosomes. With each of cell division, these telomeres get shorter, and this leads to aging and disease. But really important for this unit, people with chronic stress have shortened telomeres, so it's directly related to aging. The immune system is the final bit of information for this. The immune system is discussed in the video, but this field of psychoneuroimmunology, this is blending psychology, the nervous, the immune systems, and they really study lymphocytes. So it's these specialized white blood cells that should help us respond to threat. But what we see with stressors in the immune system is that these stressful events can decrease our functioning. And these events are things like caregiving for someone who's chronically ill, marital arguments, and exams. So really, stress has a profound influence on the body across many body systems, especially the immune system. That's all for this chapter, though.